Ariane Elfont, and this is Death the Podcast. Death is the destruction or permanent end of something. At Death the Podcast, we are looking closely at what happens when something ends. We listen, learn about, and discuss the stories that surround the subject of death. These stories bring up much more than feelings of fear and sadness. They offer opportunities for connection, for hope, and sometimes even for humor. Ultimately, if we are open to exploring death, we create greater potential to experience life. So thrilled to have Dr. Rachelle Biondolillo on our show today. Dr. B, as many of her clients call her, is a veterinarian here in New Orleans. She is part of the excellent team at Britannia Veterinary Hospital. Dr. B is joining us on Death the Podcast to have a conversation on the subject of end-of-life care for pets. Welcome, Dr. B.
Thanks, Ariane.
I am struck by the complications that could arise in providing the best care for a pet, while at the same time managing the wishes and feelings of the pet owner. How do you navigate this line between care for an animal and the feelings and opinions of the animal's owner?
That's probably the toughest thing. Everybody is different what they consider proper care for their pets. And we all have a feeling of, we would do everything we could every time, but even that's not always appropriate. We have the tools and the ability to help and step in and try to fix everything that's wrong. But, sometimes there's an adage we say, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Mm-hmm. And so the number one thing I try to focus everyone's attention on, the owner and my attention, is that little pet. How happy is that pet? We all like to talk about quality of life, and people will hear that a lot and think about that a lot. And we ask people to really try to look at that quality of life. Are they enjoying their life? And people have varying opinions on what a pet means to them. It might be a companion, a family pet for the kids. It could be, and I don't like when people say a child substitute, because people love their animals and feel incredible responsibility for them, and what their pets give back to them enriches their life. And I think saying it's a child substitute doesn't honor what a pet is to a person. It sounds like, they should have had children. And
mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes people's approach to care, it varies a lot, and we try to encourage people to just keep their pets as happy and comfortable as possible. But when it comes to end-of-life decisions, how that pet feels is hard to know, but we try to guide folks to look at how involved their pets are in their life. Are they greeting the family members when they come home? Are they eating? Are they able to get up? Are they sleeping all the time? And so we try to guide them to look at those things, because those parents know, and I call them parents because you are,
mm-hmm.
a parent to that pet who relies on you, to look at those kind of things, or maybe have an idea in your mind what is that pet's favorite things to do, and are they doing those things anymore? And maybe have a little list in mind well before any decisions come up about when it might be time to say goodbye to your pet. If the closer you get to that time, the harder it becomes. So it's good to kind of have a little list in your mind before it actually comes up, or time to need that, because it helps you be more objective.
Is that like a conversation you have with people as a pet ages?
Not necessarily, because sometimes that seems a little morbid.
Yeah.
If they start talking about it, absolutely. But it usually, there comes a time in people's minds that they have an inkling that they're starting to think about it, or just having questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time when pets are becoming seniors, we talk about what we can do for that quality of life well before there's any talk of when it might be time to say goodbye. If they have arthritis, if they have kidney problems or heart problems. So people start to know that there might be some day when this subject will come up. But for the most part, we're talking about improving quality of life through treatment. And a lot of times finances come into it too when we start talking about these things. So then sometimes that's the first thing that brings up the question, when is it time?
I would think that's got to be tough on you as the doctor, when finances might be the reason that a person might make a certain decision, as opposed to if like finances were not an issue, they might make a different decision? Or is that just one of the factors you have to stay kind of neutral and objective about, because that's really about the relationship between the owner and
it comes up a lot because people love their pets, and it destroys them when it comes down to a financial decision. I have a client who had to make a decision to treat cancer and tap into her retirement, which is a big, big, big decision. And that emotional decision, is it right or wrong? Prolonging the life of a patient with cancer, or having to make a decision to say goodbye pretty quickly, because some of these are a very timely decision. You don't want to rush a decision, but sometimes you kind of have to. And walking a person through, the fact that I need to give them permission. They're looking to me for permission that it's okay, and it is okay because they're making the best decision that they can. And they're carrying around so much guilt, and all they're trying to do is the best thing that they can for their babies, and all they feel is this guilt for having to make this decision. And oftentimes I'll approach it in this manner that, even if we had $1 million, does that mean you should necessarily take your baby through this chemo or this radiation? And they try to look at it like that. And if they feel that it's just not right, and I offer scenarios like to a lot of people, to them it's not ethically right making their babies go through extra treatments, visiting the hospital more when they don't feel, if they don't like the hospital, asking them to go more to the hospital. Maybe that's not the right thing. And a lot of times people start feeling like that's how I feel. I feel like that would be hard on my pet to bring them to the hospital when they'd rather be at home. And that kind of, it makes them feel better, like they didn't think about it like that, and they're just thinking of their guilt about, I can't do this, or should I or shouldn't I continue with treatment for whatever they're going through. And if you start giving them other ways to think about their situation, they can think, from maybe the pet's point of view and take that decision off of them, but what would my pet want? And I try to, guide that decision through what's right for your pet, and take that guilt away if I can.
As you're talking about this, I'm realizing that, the complexity in all of this. I mean, there's the dynamic of whatever's going on with the animal, whatever's going on with the pet owner, and then bringing you into the equation and getting your medical expertise about what's going on. But also, it sounds like really your psychological counsel and guidance. Yeah. And I'm wondering, what kind of training did you get?
That's a great question, because I'm thinking about it. I don't think much, but I think veterinary medicine tends to attract people who just want to help. I mean, it's a profession of, you go into it because you tend to be caring, and I think it just comes with doing it, and maybe just the kind of person that veterinarians tend to be. Mostly I remember from vet school just the medicine, but you're around so many caring professionals that if you don't have it to begin with, you pick it up by osmosis. And you meet so many people, clients and your staff, and so many people that you meet. It rubs off on you, and you just learn from. I learn from my clients all the time, and it's humbling. A lot of times you feel like, you're the person with all the answers, and these clients kind of reel you back in and realize, they're the ones who it's their decision to make. It's they have an approach, they have an opinion, and it's a team effort when you come to take care of their pet. They're the ones who have to carry out anything that you're asking them to do. So you have to make sure, can they do it? Are you asking too much? How much are they capable of handling? And what's their style or approach to pet care, and how they feel about that pet?
So you really are making very individualized decisions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, it's really individual. And that's actually the fun part of it, because finding out every time I walk into an appointment how we're going to make things happen, how we're going to make things better for this family.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're also privy to what I imagine is, like, for most people, one of the most vulnerable times making these decisions about end of life for their pets. And I'm wondering, well, I guess I have so many questions, but one is, for you, what has been one of the more memorable experiences with regard to that? In other words, you're having this window into what's really a pretty private moment that you're a part of by virtue of what you do. And is there an experience that's left an impression on you? I'm sure there are many.
With my own cat, I had to make a decision. He had a cancer, and when it was the right time. And so I was the client, knowing what I know and looking for, signs of suffering. I call back on my experience with my own cat the most to help clients with their pets, because I have to remember what it feels like to be in those shoes. If you can't remember the struggle, if you can't feel or try to empathize, I mean, it's a lot more than sympathy. I really try to empathize what someone is going through to make decisions. You can't be helpful if you don't know the emotional struggle, and be available to really listen and understand what the decision-making process is, and what, how hard it is. So with my own cat, my promise is to prevent suffering. And I encourage people to try to choose a moment that is just before the suffering. And that's always hard. And no one ever wants to put a smiling face or a wagging tail to sleep. Mm-hmm. And they could be struggling to get off the floor, unable to go out to the bathroom, not eating well, but that tail wags, and it's just impossible for people to make the decision. And
because they see their pet is still deriving...
engaged, still engaged, still having life.
Uh-huh.
No one wants to take away life. In your mind, it's the right thing. In your mind, you can say, my pet is suffering, but it's your heart that has to make that decision too. And if there's any ounce of life in that little body, it's really hard to make that decision. Some of the easiest times are when these animals look, I'm sorry to say, decrepit, and it's very clear that there is suffering. And it's easier for the human mind to take away suffering once it's there, but not to prevent suffering before it happens. So with my own cat, I looked for certain things. Could he jump on that favorite sofa that he liked to? That his cancer was in his leg. So could he squat and go to the litter box? And he was always, there was nothing wrong with his heart or his mind. He was going to have that happy face. But I had to pick a time when I thought suffering is just around the corner, and let him go, because my promise is, I can't control everything, but I can control suffering. And I'm not going to make him wait for me to be ready. I'm going to suffer no matter what. Today, in a month, I'd rather suffer a little sooner than ever have him suffer one day, if I can possibly tell that time. And that's the hard part. Mm-hmm. Telling that time. And I'm happy to meet with people or talk with them once a week, touch base, whatever it takes at that moment. When is the right time? That's the toughest part.
Well, and I imagine giving people the reassurance that while there might not be a right moment, I mean, perhaps your pet could have had 2 or 3 more days before that, before quality of life would have diminished to a point where it would have been unbearable. But that's probably not as important as what you're saying, which is putting the needs of the animal first, which is so hard when you have a loving relationship and a companion.
But most people can't do it, and I have to be okay with that too. There's a lot of pets, of families whose children are at college, and those kids grew up with this pet and they want to say goodbye. And so you might see a pet who's already in that stage of suffering. And it's important to, again, put yourself in that family's shoes, because I have to be the voice of the animal. They don't have a voice, so it's important for me, through my experience with animals, to know when to tell a family they are suffering or it's time. But that family has a member that they will never have that opportunity to say goodbye. How do you rectify that? Hospice care, there is such a thing as hospice care in animals. And if you can give pain medication, IV fluids sometimes are needed, hand feeding, comfortable beds, whatever it takes to get them to that point that if the family would like the opportunity to say goodbye and come home for a holiday, that happens a lot. You want to give them that chance, because, sometimes it might be easy to pass judgment. But then I think, if I put myself in those shoes, would I want that opportunity to say goodbye to my pet? Sure, everyone wants that. So you've got to be a problem solver, and you've got to think of a way, how can I help this pet feel comfortable so his family can come and say goodbye? Because you've only got one chance.
And speaking of like the only having one chance, which just makes me realize the enormous amount of pressure that both you and the pet owner are under to kind of make this go, I guess, is to make a really uncomfortable situation go as well as it can, because nothing's going to make it feel good or okay. I mean, that's part of the ending and the death. But do you experience people with regret for not doing it sooner or doing it too soon?
It usually takes a while for people to look back on a pet they had and say, I really waited too long. But in that moment, it doesn't feel like that at all. I think everyone wants that extra day or that extra week. And it takes time to pass to think about it in hindsight, to think, I waited too long. And even then, people are just making the best decision they can with the information they have at hand. We are not, we don't have that crystal ball. And you're just making a day-by-day decision. And I think as long as people reach out to their vet and let them know what's going on, trying to decide on your own can be a challenge. But if you have someone to help guide you through, I think it'll turn out the best that it could turn out. A lot of times people haven't reached out and maybe assume that nothing can be done, and they wait. Some people are very, very uncomfortable with the thought of being the one to decide to take a pet's life. And that's very morally wrong in their hearts. And that's fine. It can be very natural to let a pet pass on its own. And that's what people have to do that too. I do think that pets have it better because we can help them through the death process. Natural death is not always kind. But everyone would like for their pets to pass peacefully in their sleep. Unfortunately, it's only a tiny amount of pets or percentage that happens to. A lot of chronic illnesses, it tends to be a bigger reason. And that body has to go through a lot before it's finally ready to let go naturally or on its own. And so it can take a long time, and of maybe not eating or not wanting to get up. But to be at home and to have that happen naturally is important to many people. And
but what you're saying is that often will mean a lot of suffering that the animal will endure. It's
possible. It's hard to say, and I don't think there's ever a right or wrong decision for people. I would never, that's a hard thing to tell somebody. I would love to help that pet pass as peacefully as possible. And the word euthanasia means beautiful death. That's the meaning of the word. And so if I can help someone make that happen as beautifully as possible, that's our goal. There are some folks who their dogs love going to the vet. It's a place where they get treats or see their second family, and they know us well. And we'll have owners bring their favorite treats, and they'll snack along and in their final moments. And we try to give them, it's important to take them from that awake state to that resting state, to the time when we take them through the process of asking their breaths and their hearts to stop. And there's a way to do that, and we can give them little sedatives to make it peaceful. And the process of euthanasia actually involves giving anesthetics. You're just giving them more, you're giving them an overdose of it. Mm-hmm. And if done properly, it should be very peaceful. And so during that process, when they're relaxing and we give them a fluffy bed and lots of treats and their family is there, it can be a very precious moment. And there are some pets who do not like coming to the vet. I mean, it's a scary place. It's not their home. And for those, most of us are happy to go to the home and be there where that pet is happiest or most comfortable, and the family can be there. And so we'll do that too.
I mean, that's got to mean so much to people. I imagine not just to their pet, but to not have to have a familiar environment for everybody where the pet has lived.
Yeah. Many pets are much more comfortable at home, and they've got their bed or, their favorite room. For a lot of people, that would be really difficult for them, though, because they have to look at that spot and remember. So that can be, we offer both because that can be traumatic.
Right.
So as long as people know that, whatever they think is best for both their pets and for them, we try to, again, it's a very individual thing.
What kinds of things happen in these final moments? I guess I'm wondering, are there people that opt not to be present when this is going on, or do people have specific wishes around how it goes down?
Yeah, it's really difficult for a person to be able to see or touch or be with their pet that final time. It's incredibly emotionally charged. Many people would not like to have that be their last memory. They want to keep those memories of their pets, that it can be that lasting memory that kind of maybe supersedes other more special memories of their pet. So they'd prefer not to be there at that moment. They could maybe be there until their pets are somewhat sedate and just relaxed. Or sometimes they just say goodbye and leave before anything happens at all. So they have that memory of, they don't want that clouding the memories that they have of their time with their pet. Me personally, I feel sad when the families don't stay for at least when their pets are more sleepy and no longer conscious that their family's there. I don't want to say that and have anyone who's thinking about this decision and thinking about not staying, influence them and feel like it's wrong. I love when families are with their pet. Sometimes it's one person. Sometimes it's the children and the parents and the grandparents. And when I see that support group and that pet is surrounded by all that love, it makes me feel better. I don't want someone's pet to just be with me who might be a stranger, or that makes me personally sad. But that's just me because again, for the pets that I've said goodbye to, that memory is seared into my mind. It's hard, and so you always, every time you think about it, it's a direct tap to that emotion you felt that day. I mean, it's just sitting there. It can be 5 years. It can be 10 years. And as soon as I think about that day, I say goodbye. Tears. There's tears right now. Tears come to your mind. I mean, it's huge, that emotional link and everything it takes for you to get to that day. You never forget it. You never get over it.
Going back to your last moments with your cat, and what you were saying about, certainly you were so respectful in honoring what it is individual families and owners may need to do as far as saying goodbye. But I'm wondering, as you're talking about the experience for the owner of being able to say goodbye and how that stays with you, what your thoughts are about what the animal might be experiencing in that moment and having the people that have loved him or her around, or if you've thought about that.
I think about what that pet is experiencing all the time. Besides their health, to me, the mental well-being of a pet is, if a pet was mentally distressed or suffering, or afraid or frightened, to me, that's just as important. When we have pets who are afraid at our veterinary hospital, we want to do everything we can to help with their emotional needs, because it's terrible to think that a pet is distressed during any appointment or visit, but much less at a moment like that, because that's the utmost important thing that day, is to make sure that their final moments are stress-free.
I'm wondering for you, like in a day where you're seeing all kinds of things and presented with all sorts of problems with the animals that come to see you, how do you manage transitioning from what we're talking about, like end of life care, having these conversations, and or euthanasia itself, and then how do you go on with your day to the next client? Or that would be one question, but also how is that for you going home and integrating all of this into your life?
It's hard. Sometimes you have to go from euthanizing a beloved pet that you've known for years and taking that pet from that family and go right into a puppy appointment. The most joyous time, right from the saddest time. That's really hard. First of all, you need to get your composure, because the last thing someone who's there for just a wellness visit, or, they're so excited about their new puppy, that's not the right frame of mind to walk in, red-eyed, or, you compose yourself. And each person's experience is, such a treasure to them, and an individual, time for them to be their pets the focus of attention. So you step away and compose yourself for a moment. But above all, I'm there to help pets, but I'm there to help the people. And my role is still the same. I need to comfort that pet. I need to console that person. And that is what I'm here on this earth to do. So, and oftentimes that is such a bonding experience that I will see that person again, or maybe I never will, but for that moment in time, that is my whole reason here on earth, is to just make that as not all better, because it won't be all better, but as peaceful and as peaceful as it can be, as good as it can be, because it's just tough all around. Mm-hmm. But if I can make it any better at all, then I feel okay about that.
Well, it's very clear that anybody who is under your care is not alone in these moments at all. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. Our guest with Dr. Rachelle Biondolillo. She is an amazing veterinarian here in New Orleans at Prytania Veterinary Hospital. This was a really cool conversation to have with you about end-of-life care with pets.
I appreciate being able to come and talk about it. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you. The word death evokes all sorts of personal feelings, images, and stories. these stories are compelling and sharing them connects us more fully to life. I'm Ariane Alfont, and you've been listening to Death the Podcast. Join us for our next episode in this series. This show is produced and engineered by Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Jill Gross. Our theme music, It Happened, is written by David Milling and is performed by David Milling and Charles Milling. To hear more of David's music, go to his website, davidmilling.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or some other podcast app, if you can take a moment to rate and review us, that helps other people find us. You can find Death the Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or at deaththepodcast.com. Death the Podcast is a production of I&O Broadcasting.
You know Labor Day signals the unofficial end of summer, but not the end of your outdoor projects. Lowe's helps you do it right and helps you save with Labor Day deals throughout the store. Shop now and get 2 bags of Stay Green potting mix for $12. And keep your lawn looking neat and trim with a Craftsman 2-cycle 17-inch gas string trimmer, now $20 off at just $119. Whatever's still on your to-do list this Labor Day, do it right for less. Start with Lowe's. Offers valid through 8/28. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii, U.S. only.